Children don't destroy perfect lies unless they're terrified, the old violinist would later say about that night, but by then, the engagement party at the Kong estate had already become the kind of story people whispered about behind closed doors. The ballroom shimmered beneath 3 massive crystal chandeliers imported from Venice, their golden reflections dancing across polished marble floors and champagne towers taller than most children. Seoul's wealthiest families filled the room in black tuxedos and silk gowns, their laughter soft and calculated, their smiles expensive. At the center of it all stood Ethan Kong, the man newspapers called the Ghost King of Itaewon, though nobody dared use that name near him. At 38, Ethan carried the kind of quiet authority that made entire rooms straighten when he entered. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across broad shoulders shaped by discipline rather than vanity, and the silver watch on his wrist probably cost more than a suburban home in California. Yet none of those details frightened people as much as his silence did. Ethan Kong rarely raised his voice. He never needed to. Tonight was supposed to be simple. A celebration. A public announcement. His future bride, Sophia Hart, stood beside him glowing beneath the chandelier lights in an ivory designer gown that hugged elegance so perfectly it almost looked rehearsed. Cameras flashed every few seconds as politicians, CEOs, and celebrities gathered closer to the stage waiting for the official engagement speech. Sophia smiled with practiced warmth, one manicured hand resting lightly against Ethan's arm while reporters captured what looked like the perfect union between power and beauty. But perfection has a sound when it begins to crack. It sounds like tiny footsteps running across marble floors. The ballroom doors burst open so suddenly that several guests turned in irritation before the music stopped altogether. A little girl no older than 6 came sprinting barefoot through the crowd, her small white dress wrinkled, her cheeks soaked with tears. Olivia Kong. Ethan's daughter. Her breathing came in terrified little gasps as she shoved past waiters carrying silver trays and crashed directly into Ethan's legs, clutching him so tightly her tiny fingers trembled against his suit. "Daddy," she cried, her voice breaking so hard it sliced through the ballroom like shattered glass. Ethan froze instantly. Every bodyguard in the room stiffened at once, but Olivia buried her face into her father's waist before anyone could move her. "Daddy, please," she sobbed. "She's not my mom." Silence swallowed the ballroom whole. Somewhere near the orchestra stage, a champagne glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the floor, but nobody looked down. Hundreds of eyes slowly turned toward Sophia Hart. For the first time that evening, her smile faltered. Only for a second. Just a tiny crack beneath perfect makeup and polished grace. But Ethan noticed. Ethan noticed everything. Olivia's shoulders shook violently as she clung to him harder. "Please don't make me go with her," the little girl whispered through tears. The room stopped breathing. Ethan slowly lowered one hand onto his daughter's back, his expression unreadable, but the air around him changed instantly. Cold. Heavy. Dangerous in the quietest possible way. Across the ballroom, standing near the far wall beside the catering entrance, Lena Brooks felt her stomach drop. Dressed in a simple black staff uniform, she looked invisible among diamonds and tuxedos, just another employee blending into the background. But Olivia's tear-filled eyes suddenly lifted over Ethan's shoulder and locked directly onto her. Like a frightened child searching for the only safe place left in the room. The silence inside the ballroom stretched so long it became unbearable. Nobody touched their drinks. Nobody whispered. Even the photographers near the stage slowly lowered their cameras as if instinct itself warned them that something dangerous had entered the room. Ethan Kong stood perfectly still beneath the chandelier light, one hand resting against Olivia's trembling back while the other remained inside his pocket, calm and controlled. But the men who worked security for him noticed the shift immediately. They always did. The temperature around Ethan seemed colder somehow, the kind of cold that arrived before winter storms. Olivia's tiny fingers tightened around his suit jacket as she buried her face deeper against him. Her little white shoes were gone, one sock half slipping off her heel, and her breathing sounded uneven from crying too hard. Ethan lowered his eyes toward his daughter for several quiet seconds before finally speaking. Look at me, Olivia. His voice was low and steady, yet every person in the ballroom heard it clearly. Olivia slowly lifted her tear-stained face. Mascara smudges from someone else's hands marked one side of her cheek like hurried attempts to clean her up before the party. Ethan noticed that too. He noticed everything. Tell me what happened, he said softly. Across the ballroom, Sophia Hart released a delicate nervous laugh that sounded far too sharp in the silence. Ethan, sweetheart, she is overwhelmed. There are too many people tonight. Her voice carried polished elegance, but there was tension hiding underneath every word now. Olivia has been emotional lately. Ethan did not look at her. That frightened people more than shouting ever could. Sophia took one careful step forward, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her ivory gown before kneeling slightly toward the child. Olivia, baby, remember what we talked about? Come here. Olivia instantly shook harder against Ethan. No, the answer came out tiny. Immediate. Terrified. Another silence hit the room. Somewhere near the back wall, an older senator quietly cleared his throat before deciding against speaking at all. Nobody wanted to become visible in this moment. Ethan finally raised his eyes toward Sophia. Slowly. Calmly. It was the first direct look he had given her since Olivia entered the ballroom, and for a fraction of a second, Sophia's confident posture weakened. Ethan's dark gaze held the kind of stillness that made people confess things they had never planned to say aloud. Why is she afraid of you? He asked. Sophia blinked quickly. Afraid? Ethan, that is ridiculous. Her smile returned too fast. Too polished. She is 6 years old. Children become attached after loss. The therapist warned us this could happen. At the edge of the ballroom, Lena Brooks lowered her eyes immediately when Sophia glanced toward her. She already knew what was coming. In rooms like these, blame always traveled downhill. Lena stood silently beside the catering entrance in her black uniform with both hands folded tightly in front of her apron. Her natural curls were pinned neatly back, and she tried making herself smaller the way she always did around wealthy people. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant employed. But Olivia suddenly pulled away from Ethan just enough to point across the ballroom with shaking fingers. I want Lena, she cried. Every head turned toward the black maid near the wall. Lena froze completely beneath the weight of hundreds of eyes landing on her at once. Sophia's expression hardened for the first time that evening, subtle enough that most guests missed it. Ethan did not. Olivia wiped tears from her cheeks with tiny trembling hands. Please do not send her away, she whispered. Please, Daddy. And just like that, the entire ballroom understood something was very wrong. Lena Brooks had spent most of her life learning how to disappear gracefully. It was a skill the world taught certain women early, especially women who looked like her standing inside rooms that were never built for them. So even as every guest inside the Kong Estate ballroom turned to stare at her, Lena kept her shoulders lowered and her hands folded neatly against her apron like she could somehow survive this moment by becoming smaller. The orchestra remained frozen near the stage, violin bows suspended midair. Nobody moved toward the dance floor anymore. Nobody laughed. Crystal chandeliers still glowed warmly overhead, but the room no longer felt elegant. It felt exposed. Ethan Kong followed his daughter's trembling finger until his eyes landed on Lena standing near the catering doors beneath a wall of white orchids. His expression did not change, but several men near him subtly straightened. People who knew Ethan understood something dangerous about him. The quieter he became, the more carefully everyone else needed to breathe. Come here, Ethan said calmly. Lena's stomach tightened instantly. Around her, servers quietly stepped backward as though instinct warned them not to stand too close to unfolding storms. Lena forced herself forward across the marble floor, every step painfully loud inside the silence. Her simple black uniform suddenly felt heavier than armor beneath the gaze of senators, celebrities, and executives worth billions of dollars. Sophia Hart watched her approach with a smile that looked beautiful from far away but brittle up close. Lena has been helping with Olivia while I adjusted to family life, Sophia explained smoothly before anyone could ask questions. Children become attached to caretakers sometimes. Lena stopped several feet away from Ethan and lowered her eyes respectfully. Sir. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Not through her. At her. Most wealthy people never truly looked at staff members. But Ethan's gaze was sharp enough to strip lies down to the bone. Why is my daughter afraid? He asked quietly. Lena's throat tightened. She could feel Sophia watching her now, not angrily, but carefully. Controlled. Like someone waiting to see whether a servant remembered her place. Olivia has been under stress lately, Lena answered carefully. The party may have overwhelmed her. Sophia immediately nodded. Exactly. Too quickly. Ethan noticed that too. Olivia suddenly grabbed tighter onto her father's hand. No, she whispered through uneven breaths. It is not because of the party. Her tiny voice shook so hard several guests looked away out of discomfort. Ethan slowly crouched down in front of her despite the expensive suit pulling at his shoulders. The movement alone shocked half the room. Men like Ethan Kong did not kneel for anyone. Yet there he was beneath crystal chandeliers and flashing cameras, lowering himself to eye level with a frightened child. Talk to me, he said softly. Olivia looked toward Lena again before speaking. I do not want Lena to leave. Lena felt her chest ache instantly. Sophia gave a light laugh that sounded thinner now. Nobody is leaving, sweetheart. But Olivia flinched the second Sophia spoke. Tiny. Fast. Almost invisible. Ethan saw it immediately. His eyes lifted slowly toward Sophia again. This time the silence around him deepened into something nearly suffocating. Why would she think Lena is leaving? He asked. Sophia's perfect posture finally shifted. Just slightly. Ethan, honestly, this is becoming inappropriate for guests to witness. Several people nearby suddenly became very interested in their untouched champagne glasses. Nobody wanted to be trapped between a powerful man and an unraveling truth. Olivia wiped tears from her cheeks with the sleeve of her little white dress. She said good daughters do not need maids anymore, the child whispered. Lena closed her eyes for half a second. Too late. The damage was done. Across the ballroom, even the orchestra conductor slowly lowered his hands as the terrible shape of the evening finally began revealing itself. The ballroom no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like a courtroom where nobody knew who would be condemned first. Soft piano music still drifted faintly through hidden speakers overhead, but it sounded distant now, almost ghostly against the suffocating silence wrapping itself around the Kong estate. Ethan remained crouched in front of Olivia, one hand steady against her small shoulder while his dark eyes stayed fixed on her face with terrifying focus. He had built an empire by recognizing fear before anyone else could smell it in the air, and what he saw in his daughter tonight was not childish tantrum or confusion. It was genuine fear. Olivia's lower lip trembled as she tried to stop crying, but tears kept slipping down her cheeks anyway. What else did she say? Ethan asked softly. The question sounded gentle, yet several guests visibly stiffened. They understood instinctively that calm questions from powerful men were often more dangerous than yelling. Olivia hesitated. Her tiny fingers twisted nervously against Ethan's sleeve before she whispered, she said Lena makes me weak. Across the ballroom, Sophia Hart inhaled sharply. Ethan, please. Her voice carried a brittle laugh now. This is absurd. She is a child repeating things out of context. Ethan slowly rose to his full height without taking his eyes off Olivia. The movement alone shifted the entire atmosphere of the room. At 6'3", dressed in tailored charcoal and absolute control, Ethan suddenly looked less like a fiancé and more like the man people whispered about in private meetings and secured phone calls. Dangerous. Untouchable. Sophia stepped toward him carefully, her ivory heels clicking softly against marble. You know how attached children become after trauma, she said gently. I have only been trying to help Olivia become more independent. Lena stood frozen near the catering entrance, wishing desperately that she could disappear into the white walls behind her. But Olivia suddenly shook her head hard enough to send tears flying from her lashes. No, the little girl cried. You said Lena belongs downstairs. A murmur finally rippled through the crowd before dying just as quickly. Nobody wanted to be caught reacting too loudly. Sophia's polished smile flickered again. Olivia misunderstood. Ethan finally turned his gaze toward Lena. Did this happen? He asked quietly. Lena's pulse hammered painfully inside her chest. Every instinct told her to lower her head, apologize, and protect her job. Women like her did not survive inside wealthy households by exposing powerful people. They survived by enduring quietly. But then she looked at Olivia standing alone beneath 1,000 chandelier lights, small shoulders shaking inside a wrinkled white dress, and something inside Lena hurt too much to stay silent. Miss Hart has been trying to prepare Olivia for changes in the household, Lena answered carefully. Sophia immediately crossed her arms. Exactly. But Ethan did not look away from Lena. That was not my question. The room went still again. Lena swallowed hard. Olivia became upset several times this month after conversations about replacing staff, she admitted softly. Sophia's expression hardened instantly now, elegance cracking around the edges. Replacing staff is normal in homes like this, she snapped before catching herself. Too late. Ethan noticed the change immediately. He always noticed. Olivia suddenly grabbed Ethan's hand again with both of hers. Daddy, please do not let her send Lena away, she whispered desperately. She promised she would. Ethan lowered his eyes. Toward his daughter. Who promised? Olivia looked directly at Sophia. Nobody in the ballroom moved. Even the waiters holding silver trays stood perfectly frozen beneath the chandelier light as the truth slowly revealed itself piece by piece. And for the first time all evening, Ethan Kang's face lost every trace of warmth. For a long moment, nobody inside the ballroom seemed willing to breathe louder than the soft hum of the chandeliers overhead. Ethan stood motionless in the center of the room while Olivia clung to his hand with both of hers like letting go might leave her alone again. The child's tears had slowed, but fear still lingered visibly in her small face, fragile and exhausted beneath the golden light. Sophia Hart straightened her posture carefully, reclaiming pieces of her polished composure one breath at a time. Ethan, she said softly, her tone controlled again, this is becoming unfair. Olivia is grieving. Children create attachments after loss. Any therapist would explain that. Ethan did not answer immediately. That silence frightened people more than anger ever could. Near the ballroom entrance, two politicians quietly exchanged nervous glances before looking away again. Nobody wanted to become memorable tonight. Ethan slowly brushed one thumb beneath Olivia's damp cheek, wiping away a tear with surprising gentleness for a man so feared. Did anyone tell you Lena was leaving tonight? He asked. Olivia nodded instantly. Sophia did. Sophia exhaled sharply through her nose. I told her routines would eventually change after the wedding, she corrected smoothly. That is completely different. Ethan finally looked at her again. Calm. Expressionless. Dangerous in a way no raised voice could ever equal. Did you tell my daughter that Lena belongs downstairs? Sophia's jaw tightened slightly before she forced another elegant smile. Ethan, please. We are discussing household structure, not abuse. The word landed badly. Several guests visibly stiffened. Lena lowered her eyes immediately, wishing she could disappear into the polished marble beneath her feet. But Olivia suddenly stepped closer to Ethan and whispered something so softly only he heard it at first. Ethan's face did not move, yet something colder entered his eyes. Say it again, he said quietly. Olivia hesitated before looking down at the floor. Sophia said Mom would not want me acting spoiled around staff. A silence heavier than the last one spread across the ballroom. Lena felt her chest ache instantly at the mention of Olivia's mother. Amelia Kong had been gone for almost 2 years, but her absence still lingered through the estate like perfume trapped inside old fabric. Ethan had not removed a single photograph of her from the house. Not one. Olivia's tiny voice shook harder now. She said good daughters learn who belongs at the table and who does not. Across the room, somebody quietly set down a champagne glass before dropping it from nervous fingers anyway. Crystal shattered softly against marble. Nobody reacted. Sophia's expression changed again, frustration finally cracking through the perfection she had worn all evening. I was teaching manners, she said sharply. Children raised in homes like this need structure. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on her. Homes like this. Sophia realized too late how cold those words sounded. She quickly softened her voice. That is not what I meant. But Ethan was already watching her differently now, not as a future wife standing beside him beneath chandelier light, but as someone he had failed to study carefully enough. Olivia slowly turned her head toward Lena again. Lena never makes me feel bad, she whispered. The sentence was small. Honest. It hit the room harder than shouting ever could. Ethan followed his daughter's gaze toward Lena standing near the wall in her black uniform, hands trembling slightly against her apron despite every effort to remain composed. For the first time that evening, Ethan truly noticed her. Not as staff. Not as background movement inside his home. But as the woman his daughter trusted more than anyone else in the room. 2 years earlier, the Kong estate had sounded completely different. Before grief settled into the hallways like permanent winter, music used to drift through the mansion almost every evening because Amelia Kong loved old jazz records from New Orleans. She played them while decorating cupcakes with Olivia in the kitchen or while dancing barefoot through the living room with her daughter balanced against her hip. The staff used to smile more back then. Even Ethan, a man known throughout Seoul for his impossible standards and unreadable face, had once been seen laughing quietly beside the grand piano with his wife leaning against his shoulder. Then Amelia died unexpectedly during a medical emergency that shattered the entire household overnight. After the funeral, silence swallowed the estate whole. Olivia stopped speaking for nearly 4 months. Doctors came and went carrying expensive degrees and careful voices, but nothing reached her. She refused to eat unless forced. She stopped sleeping through the night. Sometimes she would sit outside her mother's empty bedroom for hours holding one of Amelia's silk scarves against her face as though scent alone could bring someone back. Ethan buried himself inside work after that. Meetings. Flights. Endless nights surrounded by security teams and contracts and whispered conversations behind closed office doors. Grief looked cleaner on him because wealthy men were allowed to disappear into business instead of collapsing in public. But Olivia had nowhere to hide from hers. Then Lena Brooks arrived at the estate on a rainy Thursday afternoon carrying one small suitcase and wearing a coat too thin for the weather. She had been hired through a private agency after 3 previous caretakers quit within weeks. Nobody expected her to last either. Olivia had not spoken to any of them. The first night Lena worked at the mansion, she found Olivia curled beneath a table inside the library long after midnight while thunder rattled against the windows overlooking the city. The little girl clutched Amelia's old scarf so tightly her tiny knuckles had turned pale. Lena did not try forcing conversation. She did not call for staff. Instead, she quietly sat on the floor several feet away and began humming an old gospel lullaby her grandmother used to sing back in Savannah, Georgia during summer storms. Soft. Slow. Gentle enough not to frighten broken things. Olivia had looked up almost immediately. That was the first moment anyone saw life return to the child's eyes. By the end of the week, Olivia allowed Lena to brush her hair before bed. 2 weeks later, she started eating again if Lena stayed beside her at the table. A month after that, Ethan walked past the sunroom one evening and froze at the sight of his daughter laughing quietly for the first time since Amelia's death while Lena helped her paint tiny watercolor flowers near the windows. He had stood there unnoticed for nearly a full minute watching them. Olivia's laughter sounded fragile then, like something healing slowly after almost disappearing forever. From that point on, Lena became part of the rhythm of the house. Olivia only slept if Lena tucked her in personally. Nightmares stopped when Lena sat beside her bed humming softly beneath dim lamplight. Staff members noticed how the child instinctively reached for Lena's hand during stressful days or crowded events. Even Ethan began adjusting schedules around the quiet stability Lena brought into the estate. But some people inside wealthy circles did not understand tenderness unless it arrived wearing diamonds. When Sophia Hart entered Ethan's life nearly a year later, she smiled politely at Lena during introductions while subtly studying the connection between the black caretaker and the little girl standing protectively beside her. At first, Sophia treated it like a temporary inconvenience. Something easy to replace once she became part of the family. She did not understand that Olivia was not attached to Lena because of routine. She trusted her because Lena had loved her gently during the loneliest season of her life. At first, Sophia Hart approached Olivia the same way she approached every important thing in her life, carefully, elegantly, and with complete confidence that affection could be managed like a public image. She bought matching dresses for them to wear during charity luncheons. She hired private etiquette coaches from Manhattan. She transformed one wing of the estate into a pastel-colored playroom filled with imported dolls and custom furniture that looked untouched beneath showroom lighting. 2. Outsiders, she appeared flawless. The future wife of Ethan Kong. Graceful. Sophisticated. The perfect woman to repair a grieving household. But children noticed things adults ignored. Olivia noticed how Sophia smiled differently when cameras appeared. She noticed how the warmth disappeared from Sophia's eyes the second guests left the room. Most of all, she noticed how uncomfortable Sophia became whenever Lena entered a space and Olivia instinctively ran toward her instead. The first real crack appeared 3 months before the engagement party during a private dinner attended by several investors from Los Angeles. Olivia had accidentally spilled sparkling water across the tablecloth while reaching for Lena's hand beneath the table. The room had gone awkwardly quiet for half a second before Lena calmly cleaned the mess without embarrassment or blame. Olivia still remembered Sophia's smile afterward. Too bright. Too controlled. Big girls do not cling to staff during formal dinners, Sophia had whispered later while fixing Olivia's dress collar in front of a mirror. People notice those things. Olivia had lowered her eyes. I just wanted Lena. Sophia's reflection remained perfectly composed behind her. That is exactly the problem. After that, the lessons began quietly. Sophia never screamed. She never lost control publicly. Her methods were colder than that. Every morning she introduced new rules. Proper posture during breakfast. Correct greetings for political guests. Which forks belonged beside which plates. Which subjects were inappropriate around wealthy company. At first, Ethan believed Sophia was simply helping Olivia adjust after years of emotional instability. He was rarely home long enough to see the small details. But Lena saw all of them. She noticed how Olivia stopped laughing freely around Sophia. She noticed the child hesitating before speaking, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Sometimes after lessons with Sophia ended, Olivia would hide in Lena's room downstairs near the staff quarters and quietly ask questions no 6-year-old should need to ask. Does Daddy think I am embarrassing? Do rich daughters have to stop hugging people? Would Mom be disappointed in me too? Lena always answered the same way while brushing Olivia's hair gently before bed. Your mother loved your heart first. But the pressure inside the estate kept growing. Sophia wanted the household refined before the engagement announcement became public. She began removing little pieces of comfort one by one. Fewer bedtime stories downstairs with Lena. Fewer afternoons in the kitchen baking cookies with staff. More lessons upstairs. More appearances beside Sophia in photographs. Then came the conversation Olivia never forgot. It happened the night before the party inside the enormous walk-in closet attached to Sophia's private suite. Olivia stood silently while Sophia adjusted a white ribbon in her hair beneath bright vanity lights. Tomorrow is important, Sophia said smoothly. Important girls behave correctly. Olivia nodded nervously. Can Lena stay with me during the party? Sophia's hands paused for only a second. No, the answer came soft but sharp enough to make Olivia shrink instantly. Sophia crouched down until their faces aligned in the mirror. You are Ethan Kang's daughter, she whispered carefully. People will judge the future of this family through you. You cannot keep clinging to someone who works downstairs. Olivia's eyes filled immediately. But I love her. Sophia's smile never reached her eyes. Then it is time you learned love and status are not always the same thing. The night before the engagement party, rain pressed softly against the massive windows of the Kang estate while staff members rushed through hallways preparing floral arrangements, crystal glasses, and imported desserts flown in from Paris that morning. Upstairs, the mansion glowed with expensive perfection. Downstairs near the service corridors, Lena Brooke sat on the edge of her small bed folding Olivia's favorite blue cardigan when she heard tiny footsteps running toward her door. A second later, Olivia burst inside breathing hard, tears already spilling down her cheeks. Lena, she whispered desperately, please do not let her take you away. Lena immediately knelt in front of the child, her expression tightening with concern. Hey, what happened? Olivia threw her arms around her neck so tightly Lena nearly lost balance. The little girl's body trembled violently beneath her white pajama sleeves. Sophia said after tomorrow everything changes. Lena's chest ached instantly. She gently smoothed Olivia's dark hair back from her damp cheeks. Sweetheart, nobody is taking me anywhere tonight. But Olivia shook her head harder. She said good daughter stay upstairs. The words sounded rehearsed now, repeated too many times by a frightened child trying to understand adult cruelty. Lena closed her eyes briefly before forcing calm back into her voice. Listen to me carefully. She tilted Olivia's chin upward gently. Nothing about love depends on stairs. Olivia stared at her silently for a second before whispering the question that shattered Lena completely. Then why does she make me feel ashamed every time I come here? Lena could not answer immediately. Outside, thunder rolled softly through the rain-covered hills surrounding the estate. Somewhere upstairs, staff members laughed nervously while arranging champagne bottles for tomorrow's celebration. The whole house was preparing for a future Olivia clearly feared. Lena finally wrapped both arms around the child carefully. You never need to feel ashamed for loving people, she whispered into her hair. Olivia clung tighter. Promise? I promise. But upstairs, Sophia Hart stood inside the master suite reviewing seating arrangements beside floor-to-ceiling windows glowing against the storm. Her expression remained flawless while a wedding planner nervously explained adjustments for the engagement announcement. Then Sophia noticed movement on the security monitor mounted near Ethan's office entrance. Olivia. Downstairs again. With Lena. The planner continued talking, but Sophia stopped listening entirely. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she watched the little girl curled safely in Lena's arms beneath warm lamplight in the staff quarters. Not upstairs where she belonged. Not learning refinement. Not preparing for tomorrow. Sophia slowly set down her wineglass. Leave the new seating chart, she said quietly. 20 minutes later, a sharp knock echoed against Lena's door. Olivia stiffened instantly in her arms. Lena already knew who stood outside before opening it. Sophia entered wearing cream silk loungewear and effortless elegance that somehow made the tiny room feel even smaller. Her eyes swept across the modest furniture, folded laundry, and children's books stacked beside Lena's bed with visible disapproval before settling on Olivia. There you are, Sophia said smoothly. Olivia lowered her eyes immediately. It is bedtime. The child held tighter onto Lena's sleeve. Sophia's smile cooled by a fraction. Olivia. Lena carefully stood. She was upset. I can see that. Sophia stepped closer, heels clicking softly against the wooden floor. And yet somehow she always runs here instead of learning to manage her emotions properly. Olivia flinched at the tone. Tiny. Fast. But Lena noticed. Sophia crouched gracefully in front of the child. Tomorrow is important, she said quietly. You cannot embarrass your father by acting dependent on staff in front of guests. Olivia's eyes filled instantly. Lena is not just staff. Sophia's smile vanished completely for the first time. In this house, she said softly, everyone has a place. You need to learn yours. Back inside the ballroom, the silence around Ethan Kong had become almost unbearable. Guests no longer pretended to sip champagne or continue conversations. The entire evening had frozen around one frightened little girl standing beneath crystal chandeliers in wrinkled white satin while the most powerful man in the room slowly realized he had missed something happening inside his own home. Olivia stood close against Ethan's side now, one tiny hand gripping his fingers tightly as though she feared someone might pull her away at any second. Sophia remained perfectly poised several feet across from them, but the polished confidence she carried earlier that evening had begun cracking beneath pressure. Ethan noticed every detail. The tension in her jaw. The way she folded her arms only after difficult questions. The sharpness hiding beneath controlled smiles. Men like Ethan survived dangerous worlds by studying what people tried hardest to hide. What happened before the party? He asked quietly. Olivia lowered her eyes immediately. The little girl's breathing became uneven again. Lena took one unconscious step forward before stopping herself. Sophia noticed. Ethan, she said softly, this has gone far enough. Olivia is overwhelmed and exhausted. Ethan ignored her completely. His full attention remained on his daughter. Olivia. His voice softened slightly. Look at me. Slowly, Olivia obeyed. Tears still clung to her lashes beneath the ballroom lights. Did someone upset you before the guests arrived? Olivia hesitated for several long seconds. Then she nodded once. Small. Terrified. Ethan's expression did not change, but several men near the walls quietly straightened. Tell me. Olivia swallowed hard. Sophia got mad because I cried. Sophia immediately exhaled in frustration. She was hysterical for nearly an hour over a dress fitting. Olivia flinched again the second Sophia interrupted. Ethan saw it instantly. This time everyone else did too. A ripple of discomfort moved quietly through the room. Ethan's gaze shifted toward Sophia with chilling calm. Let her finish. Sophia went silent. Olivia twisted Ethan's sleeve nervously between her fingers. I did not want to wear the white dress, she whispered. I wanted the blue one Mom bought me before. Her tiny voice cracked before finishing the sentence. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. Amelia's name still lived unspoken between them like an open wound. Olivia continued quietly. Sophia said I embarrassed everyone. Sophia crossed her arms tightly now. Because she locked herself inside the dressing room and refused to come out while staff waited nearly 40 minutes. Ethan looked back toward Olivia. Did she yell at you? Olivia shook her head quickly. No, for one brief second, Sophia almost looked relieved. Then Olivia whispered the rest. She locked the door after. The ballroom stopped breathing again. Even the air itself seemed to freeze beneath the chandeliers. Lena's stomach dropped instantly because she knew exactly which room Olivia meant. Ethan stared at his daughter without blinking. What door? He asked softly. Olivia's lip trembled. Violently now. The little sitting room beside Sophia's closet. Sophia stepped forward immediately. That is not true. Her voice came too fast this time. Too sharp. I asked her to calm down privately for a few minutes because she was screaming and refusing to cooperate. Olivia burst into tears again. It was dark. The words shattered something invisible inside the ballroom. And she said if I kept acting like a baby, Olivia's tiny shoulders shook harder now. Lena would disappear forever. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Somewhere near the back wall, one of the servers quietly covered her mouth in horror. Ethan slowly lifted his eyes toward Sophia again. Calm. Cold. Absolutely unreadable. but for the first time all evening, Sophia Hart looked afraid. The fear on Sophia Hart's face lasted less than a second, but inside rooms filled with powerful people, 1 second was enough to change everything. The elegant composure she had worn all evening cracked beneath the weight of Olivia's trembling confession, and every guest in the ballroom felt the shift immediately. Ethan Kong remained perfectly still in the center of the room, one hand resting lightly against his daughter's shoulder while silence swallowed the estate whole. Nobody touched their drinks anymore. Even the orchestra stood frozen near the stage beneath golden chandelier light. Sophia recovered first. She always did. Her posture straightened carefully, and when she spoke again, her voice carried polished disbelief touched with wounded dignity. "Ethan, this is insane." She let out a sharp breath and glanced around the ballroom as though embarrassed by the entire scene. "I was disciplining a child having a tantrum before an important event. That is not abuse." Ethan did not answer. His dark eyes remained fixed on her with terrifying calm. Sophia stepped forward another inch. Olivia locked herself in the room first, she continued quickly. She screamed, cried, refused to wear the dress, and would not stop demanding Lena. I simply tried to calm her down privately. Olivia immediately shook her head hard enough to send fresh tears across her cheeks. "You turned off the lights," she whispered. The sentence landed like ice water over the room. Sophia's jaw tightened. Because she needed to settle down. She was scared, Lena said softly before she could stop herself. The entire ballroom turned toward her instantly. Lena froze beneath the sudden attention, regret flashing across her face the second the words escaped. Staff members did not interrupt people like Sophia Hart. Not publicly. Not inside rooms like this. Sophia looked at Lena slowly now, and the warmth disappeared completely from her expression. "Excuse me?" The softness in her voice felt sharper than yelling. Lena lowered her eyes immediately. "I only meant Olivia was frightened when I found her afterward." Sophia gave a cold little laugh. "Found her afterward?" She folded her arms tightly. "You mean after she ran downstairs to hide in the staff quarters again instead of learning basic boundaries?" Ethan's gaze shifted subtly toward Lena. "You found her crying?" he asked quietly. Lena hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent. But Olivia was clutching Ethan's hand so tightly now her knuckles had turned pale beneath the ballroom lights. "Yes, sir," Lena admitted softly. Sophia's frustration finally broke through the polished mask completely. "This is exactly the problem." Her voice echoed harder than intended across the ballroom. "She is overly attached because everyone in this house encourages emotional dependence instead of discipline." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sophia turned toward Ethan desperately now, trying to regain control of the narrative slipping through her fingers. "I have spent months trying to help Olivia become stronger, more mature, more appropriate for this family's public life." Ethan finally spoke. Quietly. "Appropriate." The single word chilled the room instantly. Sophia swallowed. "That is not what I meant." But Ethan was already watching her differently now. Not as a fiancée. Not as a future partner standing beside him beneath chandeliers and camera flashes. He was studying her the way dangerous men studied problems before deciding what to do with them. Olivia suddenly buried her face against Ethan's side again. "I do not want her to be my mom," she cried softly. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Ethan lowered one hand gently into his daughter's hair while keeping his eyes locked on Sophia. Calm. Unreadable. Deadly in its stillness. Then, for the first time all evening, he asked the question everyone in the ballroom had become too afraid to think out loud. "Why were you trying so hard to replace someone my daughter clearly already trusted?" The question hung over the ballroom like smoke nobody could escape from. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead, casting warm gold across marble floors and frozen faces, but the room no longer felt luxurious. It felt exposed. Sophia Hart stared at Ethan Kong as though trying to calculate which version of him stood in front of her now. The businessman she charmed at galas. The grieving widower she slowly moved closer to over the past year. Or the man powerful enough to make entire industries collapse with one quiet decision. Ethan's expression gave her nothing. Olivia remained pressed tightly against his side, her small fingers twisted into the fabric of his suit jacket while Lena stood several feet away beneath the unbearable weight of attention she never wanted. Sophia exhaled carefully and softened her tone again. I was not replacing anyone, she said. I was trying to prepare Olivia for the future. Ethan's gaze never shifted. By threatening the one person she trusts? I never threatened her. You told her Lena would disappear. Sophia's composure cracked again. Because this arrangement is unhealthy. Her voice sharpened despite herself. Ethan, look around this room. These are influential people. Powerful families. Olivia cannot spend the rest of her life emotionally attached to hired help. The second the words left her mouth, the atmosphere inside the ballroom changed completely. Several guests visibly stiffened. A senator's wife near the orchestra quietly looked down at the floor. Even the waitstaff stopped pretending not to listen anymore. Lena lowered her eyes instantly, shame and humiliation burning across her face exactly the way Sophia intended. Hired help. Two small words capable of reducing years of loyalty and love into something disposable. Olivia looked up immediately, tears still clinging to her lashes. Do not call her that, she whispered. Sophia blinked. Olivia, sweetheart, do not. The little girl's voice shook hard, but this time she did not hide behind Ethan. Lena stayed when everybody else left. Silence swallowed the room again. Ethan slowly turned his head toward Lena. Everybody else left? Lena froze. Her pulse pounded so loudly she could barely hear the soft hum of the chandeliers overhead. Olivia wiped at her face angrily with both hands. After Mom died, everybody kept quitting because I cried too much. Her breathing hitched again. But Lena stayed. Ethan's eyes remained on Lena now. Calm. Focused. Is that true? Lena hesitated for several painful seconds. She hated attention. Hated standing visible in rooms built for wealthy people while cameras and strangers watched her speak. Some employees struggled after Mrs. Kong passed, she answered softly. Olivia was hurting. And you were not? Ethan asked quietly. The question caught her completely off guard. Lena looked up before she could stop herself. For the first time that evening, Ethan was not looking at her like staff. He was looking at her like a human being standing in the wreckage of something painful. Lena swallowed hard. Children should not grieve alone, she whispered. Across the ballroom, Sophia folded her arms tighter. This is exactly the emotional manipulation I warned you about. The sentence landed badly the second it left her mouth. Ethan turned toward her slowly. Manipulation. His voice remained low. Controlled. Deadly in its calmness. Sophia immediately realized her mistake. That is not what I meant. But Ethan stepped slightly in front of Olivia now without. He was looking at Sophia now. There was no anger in his face. No raised voice. No dramatic movement. Somehow that made the atmosphere even more frightening. Men who built power through fear often exploded when challenged. Ethan became quieter. And everybody in the room understood instinctively that quiet from a man like him usually meant something irreversible had already begun. Sophia tried recovering control one final time. She smoothed invisible wrinkles from her ivory gown and lifted her chin with practiced elegance. Ethan, you are allowing emotions to cloud reality, she said carefully. I was trying to help your daughter become stronger. Independent. Refined enough to survive the expectations attached to your name. Ethan's eyes never left her. By making her afraid? Sophia exhaled sharply. Children need structure. Olivia shrank closer against Ethan's side immediately at the tone. Tiny. Automatic. Ethan noticed that too. Across the ballroom, Lena stood completely still beneath the chandelier light, wishing desperately she could disappear before things became worse. Because she already understood something Sophia did not. Ethan was no longer asking questions to understand the situation. He was asking questions to confirm what he already knew. "Did you ever tell me any of this?" Ethan asked quietly without looking at Lena. The question stunned her. Lena blinked once, caught off guard by the sudden attention. "No, sir." "Why?" Her throat tightened painfully. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward her again. Wealthy people often talked about sentence stunned the room. Sophia straightened slightly, relieved too early. But Lena continued before anyone else could interrupt. "I am staff." Her voice remained calm despite trembling hands folded against her apron. "I know exactly where I belong in this house." Ethan's eyes shifted toward her slowly. Lena forced herself to continue anyway. "That is why I stayed quiet." She finally looked at him directly for the first time all evening. "Because powerful families do not usually choose people like me when conflict begins." The honesty of the sentence settled heavily through the ballroom. Several guests quietly looked away. They understood exactly what she meant. Lena took a slow breath. "I thought if I endured it quietly, Olivia would not lose another person she depended on." Silence followed immediately afterward. Deep. Crushing. Even Sophia no longer seemed certain what to say. Olivia suddenly wrapped both arms around Lena's waist without caring who watched. "I do not care if she is staff," the little girl cried softly. "She stayed when everybody else got tired of me." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Just once. A tiny movement almost nobody noticed. But those closest to him understood the meaning instantly. Regret. Real regret. When Ethan opened his eyes again, something inside him had changed. The distance he usually carried between himself and everyone else seemed gone now, replaced by something colder and far more personal. He looked first at Olivia clinging protectively to Lena. Then at Lena herself standing humiliated beneath a room full of wealthy strangers after months of silent loyalty. Finally, his gaze settled on Sophia Hart. Calm. Absolute. Final. And for the first time since entering the ballroom that evening, Sophia looked less like a future bride and more like someone standing at the edge of a door slowly closing forever. The ballroom remained completely silent as Ethan Kong took one slow step forward. Crystal light reflected across polished marble beneath his shoes while hundreds of wealthy guests watched the future of the evening collapse without anyone daring to interrupt it. Sophia Hart stood frozen near the center of the room, her ivory gown glowing beneath the chandeliers like a picture from a luxury magazine, but the confidence she arrived with had vanished completely now. Ethan stopped directly in front of her. Calm. Unreadable. Dangerous in the quietest possible way. Olivia remained wrapped around Lena's waist behind him, refusing to let go even for a second. Ethan looked at Sophia for a very long time before speaking. "You were never competing with Lena." His voice stayed low and controlled, yet every person inside the ballroom heard every word clearly. Sophia swallowed hard. "Ethan, you were competing with the memory of a woman who loved my daughter without conditions." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. Ethan reached up slowly and loosened the cufflinks at his wrists with deliberate calm. "And instead of earning Olivia's trust, you tried teaching her shame." The sentence landed harder than shouting ever could. Nobody moved. Even the photographers lowered their cameras completely now. Sophia's voice cracked for the first time all evening. "I was trying to prepare her for this world." Ethan glanced briefly around the ballroom filled with politicians, investors, celebrities, and people powerful enough to influence entire countries with private phone calls. Then he looked back at Olivia hiding behind Lena with tear-stained cheeks and frightened eyes. "If this world requires a child to feel small in order to belong," he said quietly, "then perhaps this world deserves less respect than I thought." Several guests visibly lowered their eyes. Sophia looked stunned. Ethan slowly removed the engagement ring from his finger. The tiny movement felt louder than thunder inside the silent room. Sophia stared at the ring in disbelief. You cannot be serious. Ethan placed the ring carefully onto a silver tray abandoned earlier by one of the servers. The soft metallic sound echoed through the ballroom like the final note of a song ending badly. This engagement is over. No one breathed. No one whispered. Sophia looked around the room desperately, searching for support that never came. The same people who praised her elegance all evening now avoided eye contact completely. Because power changed directions quickly inside rooms like these. And everyone understood where Ethan Kang's loyalty stood now. Sophia's voice lowered into something smaller. You are humiliating me in front of everyone. Ethan's gaze remained perfectly steady. No, a long silence followed before he finished softly. Your choices did that. The room went still again. Sophia stared at him for several painful seconds before finally turning toward the ballroom doors. Her heels clicked sharply against marble as she walked away beneath hundreds of silent eyes. Nobody stopped her. Nobody followed. The massive doors closed behind her with a quiet final sound that somehow felt heavier than shouting. For several moments afterward, Ethan said nothing at all. Then he turned slowly toward Lena. She immediately lowered her eyes, uncomfortable beneath the attention. Look at me, Ethan said quietly. Hesitantly, Lena obeyed. Ethan glanced down at Olivia, still